So the three things that we're going to talk about, this is a diagram called the condition intervention diagram. We're going to talk about that first. Then we're going to talk about logic models, and then we're going to be done. And you're going to be working with your working groups, I think, for the rest of the day pretty much. But there are going to be a couple of times I ask you to turn to your neighbor to make sure that we're understanding each other. Okay. So, condition, intervention. Condition, intervention. This is a diagram that I created. This is original to me. This one's not. The condition intervention diagram is our way of articulating what exactly is the problem we are trying to solve here, people. What exactly is the problem we are trying to solve? So when we articulate a condition, what we're articulating is a perceived need. The intervention is what we're going to do about it. So to give a very simple illustration, IRIS, an organization right here in New Haven, perceives that refugees who are coming to New Haven, who are oftentimes supported by congregations, have one or more family members who are stuck at home all day, and they get very lonely. So the condition is loneliness. The condition is isolation. The condition is church sponsors only have so many hands and so many hours in the day. IRIS's intervention is their Cultural Companions program. The Cultural Companions program, which I just signed up for, and I met my companion yesterday, and it was so great, and I'm just so excited. The Cultural Companions program has people who aren't part of sponsoring churches go visit once a week to the person who's kind of stuck at home for English partnership and for doing fun stuff together and providing some support. So the condition, loneliness and isolation. The intervention, cultural companions. That sounds really simple, doesn't it? Well, many times when a faith community gets together, they talk only about the interventions. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? What are we going to do? And they kind of lose track of the condition. What was the issue? What was the thing that we were trying to solve? And in fact, quite often when we find that a program is not working, what we realize is the condition is long gone. Or the condition has changed to the point of unrecognizability from the time the intervention was created. You could get crazy and say that worship is an intervention. The condition is need for celebration of God's great gift to us as a response to the amazingness of our lives and world, and need to do it together because that's just the best thing that God's given us is each other. But how often do we really talk about that? No, how often do we talk about why we come together for worship? Not that much. It's not a bad thing, it's just we don't talk about it that much. So when planning a new program, it's really helpful to spend more time talking about the condition, the problem that we're trying to solve, the issue we're trying to address, and maybe like a little less time talking about the intervention. Because interventions will change based on what the condition dictates. So what I'd like you to do is to turn to a neighbor on your work team and just take a moment to define with your partner, just one person from your working group, two if we're absolutely out of people, to define what's the condition that's relevant to your working group. What's the condition relevant to your working group? So I have a process question. Not so much about what you identified your condition to be, but I wonder if somebody can share what was it like to try to think about your group using this perspective of a condition with an intervention. What was it like to do that? Yeah, please.
Well, I think that we all have it's that my Polaroid is different than their Polaroid.
Yeah.
And I know why I'm here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's different. But what they have to say is still truly important.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's going to help me make a distinct difference, which is very helpful.
So, I mean, based on that, I mean, can you imagine trying to build an intervention when you don't even have
This
So
condition.
can you see why so often the program idea, like if it works, what a coincidence. Other observations. Yeah, please.
Well, before we have the specific tasks with our groups, I was thinking about the condition about, first of all, like why we're all here today. And I feel like that has totally morphed from like something where we kind of thought a while ago, you know, our church attendance and finances are kind of dwindling, and that's the condition that we have to fix somehow. But I don't feel like that's the condition at all right now. But I think that's how it kind of started out. And now it's like, wait, who are we in New Haven? And what can we do? Because the condition is New Haven, I feel more, or our culture right now, and us knowing that we have something good, and how do we fit into that? But it just dawned on me, like, wait, the original condition that got us started talking about this, I don't even feel like that's the deal anymore.
Well, thank you for what a beautiful observation. So in a way, you know, having money, having leaders, having bodies is an intervention, more so than a condition. But what you're saying, and can you remind me of your name? I can't see your name tag.
Carolyn.
Oh, Carolyn. So what Carolyn is saying is so touching to me is that we imagine that God has a mental picture of New Haven. And we can see it but through a mirror dimly. You know, we as human beings, according to Paul, only have limited insight into what God might be picturing. But we can kind of approximate it a little bit. If we take all of our Polaroids and put them together, maybe that's more like it. And so if that's the condition, we want the city, we want this region to look more like what God is picturing. If that's the condition, the intervention might still involve money and people, but it's just not putting the cart before the horse. Thank you for sharing your experience of that process. I do a lot of work around evaluation, and those of you who are educators can share with me a big collective sigh whenever you hear the expression outcome evaluation. Yeah, I know what I mean. No church left behind, no time. So you gotta know, I love outcomes-oriented evaluation. I realize that that term has been hijacked by those who would like to take funding away from schools, in a way punishing the teachers for not having done a good enough job with children who our society as a whole has failed. Just trust me, I know that's a knee-jerk reaction, but knee-jerk reaction. So it's really important though to point out evaluation principles associated with the condition and intervention diagram, which is what you just learned how to use. So you and your work groups can make a circle and talk about your condition. You can make arrows that talk about the interventions that make sense. The question is, how do you know what works and what does not work? So process evaluation is the kind of evaluation you'll probably do at the end of this event. Did you like the event? Did you not like the event? Did you like the food? Did you like the location? Did you like the speaker? Did you hate the speaker? Did you like the time of day? Did you hate the time of day? That's a process evaluation, and it's very important because before planning the next time you're together, you're going to want to pull that out and say what worked and what didn't work, right? It's a process evaluation. An outcomes evaluation has to do with checking in on how the condition is changing. So the condition that this gathering that inspired the idea for this gathering is leaders from different congregations are trying to think about doing something very hard to do. They need to be equipped, and they need to get to know each other so they trust each other enough to enter a process even more fully that's really freaking scary. And they need to be equipped, and that's what this gathering is for. Equipped with trust, equipped with skills. And if you leave this gathering feeling more equipped, more skilled, less overwhelmed, how are we doing, Tony? Down to 4, then this event's outcome is good. Whether the process was good or not is like, nah. The process, it's important that the process is good, but the change in the outcome is really important. So does New Haven look more like what God pictures, when God pictures New Haven the way God created it to be? That's a good outcome. Is it easy to measure? No. Can you take a slide rule to it? No. So why is it that our evaluation practices for interventions are really good? Our evaluation practices, like, on a scale of 1 to 5, did you like the food or did you not like the food? You know, I got a muffin, I'm 5. Great. Easy to measure, easy to measure. Because it's easy, we're better at it. Measuring the change in the condition takes a lot of deliberateness. And my hope for you is that as you do your work together in your teams, you don't get so in love with planning and evaluating your interventions that you get distracted from what it was you were trying to do. We're just more confident here, and we're less confident here. And you know, that which causes us to feel confident is a magnet. It's just so attractive because we feel like we know what we're doing, and everyone likes to know what they're doing. It feels so good, you know? So that's all I got to say about this mode of program planning and evaluation. Do you feel like you could do this in your group? I mean, it's not really graphically difficult. It's an arrow. I think you might be able to manage that. This model that we're going to do next is called a logic model. Not original to Sarah Drummond by any stretch of the imagination. So, who here is familiar with the United Way? Okay, so the United Way is a consortium. It's kind of a clearinghouse.
Beth works for the United States.
Oh, come on.
Oh, I was gonna leave it out.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's fine. In my head.
No, this is like totally pro-United Way. So the United Way gives a lot of resources to a lot of organizations that are different from each other. And the Kellogg Foundation has given the United Way a lot of money. You might know, if not I'll tell you, that foundations that give away a lot of money every year, more. Foundations expect more say, more information, and more control over the money they give away every year. Why? Because we're not in the modern era anymore. In the modern era, we trusted our institutions. In the postmodern era, our institutions proved that they're made up of people who are not perfect. And boy, did they prove that just spectacularly. To the point that trust in institutions has come down, probably to a more reasonable level, considering how many people are in them. And yet, the Kellogg Foundation didn't want to not give money to the United Way, so it communicated to the United Way, we need some way of knowing the impact, the results of the money we're giving you. And the United Way was kind of overwhelmed because they have so many different organizations they work with that it's hard to tell the story. It doesn't make good sound bites. And so in collaboration between the Kellogg Foundation and the United Way, they developed a tool called the logic model. And this was like in the late 70s, early 80s, and many organizations have adopted logic models over the years as ways in which to think a program all the way through. To think a program all the way through. So what we're going to do is learn how to use a logic model. This is much more complicated than this model, but you seem wicked smart, as we say back in Boston. You seem wicked smart. And then we're going to do another exercise and then we'll be done. Okay, so the best way to read a logic model, I like to joke in my theological school settings, we read it in Hebrew, which means this way. This way. Hebrew is backwards.
Also
right?
Chinese.
Oh, see? Backwards except for forwards. Okay, so the way you read a logic model is that you start with this column here. If you can't see it, it says indicators. Indicators. So we Christians believe that sacraments, like communion and baptism, are outward and visible signs of an inward change. Indicators are outward and visible signs that a program is working. What would be an outward and visible sign that my cultural companion example was working? Outward and visible sign, homebound women from refugee families are smiling more. I see them out in the community with their friends. I hear them laughing. I see them chew out the cashier in English. I'm going to teach my kids how to do. How to chew out the cashier and shortchange them in English. Outward and visible signs. I can see them, I can hear them, I can smell them, I can touch them. They're outward and visible signs. That outward and visible sign is associated with what's called an outcome. Now, different logic models use different words. Sometimes you see outcome, sometimes you see impact. But the outward and visible sign that a formerly lonely refugee woman is smiling would say that the impact or the outcome is that she's happier. She's happier. Smile, happy. Okay, let's back up. What needed to happen? What needed to have happened? I know there's an English teacher in the room. I don't remember what verb tense this is. But so it's some subjunctive of something. I don't know. Okay, so what would have had to have happened for that happiness to take place? The cultural companion spent time with the refugee woman in order to help increase her confidence, help increase her familiarity with customs, and that time was well spent. When are we going to chew out the cashier who shortchanged you at the mini mart? Okay. So that's what needed to have happened for that happiness outcome to cause that smile. You see where I'm going with this? Okay. So then we get to the question of the inputs. Well, the inputs that would really lead to that output of time being spent together required matching the cultural companion with the refugee woman. Assessing whether that person was safe to meet with the refugee woman and appropriate for that work. Helping them meet each other, helping them navigate the difficult task of matching schedules across two completely different lifestyles. So that work needed to have happened. That matching and the organizing needed to have happened so that the time could be spent and the happiness could be increased and the smile shows up on the face. We back all the way up. What kind of resources needed to be available? What kind of resources needed to be available? Education for the matcher. Education and life experience for both the companion and the refugee. Money that creates an organization like IRIS to match up those professionals with the work that needs to be done. Time, lots of time. So we hear often in religious life, your time and your talent and your money all need to be invested. What the logic model does is helps us think all the way through. From that which we need to be able to see all the way to that which needs to have been available to make it all possible. Quite often when I do work, like consulting work with an organization where things have kind of gone off the rails, we can discover a lot about what got mixed up around here. We don't have to go all the way back. We get stuck here, the outcome. Why? Outcomes are not visible. Outcomes are not inherently measurable. All we can measure is the indicators. Do I know that a heart has been transformed? No. Can I see a smile? Can I hear, good job, I like that? Sure, measurable. This is an inward change. It's an inward change. It's subtle, it's difficult to describe. And if our Polaroid pictures have never been compared one with the other, we might have a very different idea about the outcome we were shooting for to begin with. What is the change that we want to see happen? If you can't even make it back here, how can you start talking about what resources you need if you don't even know what outcomes you're shooting for? The outcomes are much later in the process. So the reason I use this model is that, first of all, when I'm helping to plan an evaluation, the indicators are how you evaluate the condition. So that's straight up outcome evaluation. Outcome evaluation is condition evaluation, changes to the condition, yeah? So these all kind of flow together. In my book, you can see like they're all on one page. It looks it looks exactly like this, but I was going to say it looks a little bit better, but it's basically exactly like this. The indicators are what we can see, and my recommendation whenever a person's planning an evaluation of whether a program is working or not is don't even think about inputs. Inputs are all about what you're doing. You want to understand your outcome, your impact. That's what you want to understand. The only place you can do that is here. Yeah. You can't do it by taking a slide and go, who cares what you're doing? What we care about is what is the change that's taking place. After we know what change is taking place, then we can talk all day about what you're doing. But the process evaluation of the intervention cannot take for granted that everybody had the same idea of the change we were trying to bring about in the world. We don't know that. That's why we have to work together. Only God has a perfect picture of what we're supposed to be in this world. Amen. People don't. We can together try to approximate it. The more the merrier. But we do need to do that work of trying to get our Polaroids to come together. So what I now invite you to do is to turn to turn to the same partner, because now you all are used to each other. Turn to the same partner. And what you do is name an indicator that you would love to see. An indicator that's on your Polaroid picture. What's an indicator on your Polaroid picture? Go for it. Yeah. in the modern era. Oh, well. Lots of other stuff was way worse. Lots of other stuff is way worse. So I hope that you found these tools to be provocative of good thinking for your work together later. I'm getting ready to take my leave and let you have some time for debriefing. Is there somebody who's going to facilitate the debriefing time? It might be worthwhile if somebody from the coordinator team took that role. Peter, do you think you could do that? So the idea of the debriefing is that I'm going to go. You're going to use some of these tools in your conversation. You're thinking about your work together. But my closing thought, which has already been presented, is one that I actually find pretty exciting. And I hope that after our time together, you actually know what it means. Visioning is the work that we do when we try to picture alive something that doesn't yet exist except for in the imagination of God. That's visioning. Changes that need to be made to the world as it is in order for it to become the world as God pictures it are our work. That's our work. We only have a little bit to give, but it's better than nothing. And if we do it together, a lot more can change to make our world now look like the world as God pictures it. In the modern era, the leaders of your congregations were probably very similar to each other in the mental pictures that they had.
And the way they looked.
And the way they looked, the way they thought, and what they had to bring was less rich for it. But it was probably easier. Oh, well. So I hope this time has been helpful. I hope your debriefing is fruitful. Thank you so much for having me come and work with your congregations. I love you guys. I want to start a new church because I'm going to join it.
You can go ahead and punch right now.
Tony and Roger and I were delegated to meet with Sarah, and so we did, and we talked about what was going to happen here, and we did a quick check-in at the break, and we have to tell you that we weren't as smart as we thought you might think we were, because she just so far exceeded our expectations.
Yes. Oh, that's not necessary, but thank you, and thanks again for having me become part of your community for this morning. I really enjoyed it very much. So thanks for the warm welcome, and Godspeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we have about half an hour before we are scheduled to start lunch, and I just first wanted to get your reactions to what we learned this morning. First of all, did everyone share the enthusiasm that Tony and Roger and I had about how this went?
Okay.
Yeah. Any concerns or questions that we might answer? Good.
We'll figure it out.
One comment, one of the pieces that really struck me was that how good a time this is to be the kind of church we are, going into, the post-modern age. We got a running start. So, yeah, that's great.
Yes.
I have a comment that is inspired by this environment here, and this was all fabulous, and there are really other things to say about this, but having not been here before, this is really beautiful, as Alan alluded to, and the school where I teach has gone through a renovation of one of our spaces, and Tony knows about this, and I won't go into all the details, but in many ways, it's a very frustrating space because it doesn't work for a lot of the things that need to happen there. And for some it does, for some it doesn't. But I was at a conference this summer in Chicago, in a theater school space that was just stunningly fabulous. And you walk into this space and your heart feels open and creative because of the way the sun is shining, and there are these open rooms that are light-filled, that are ready for beautiful things to happen in them. And that is how I feel in this room here today. And for people in New Haven to want to come to a place, I just had this sense today, it's like, we just need to get rid of both of them. And this is
Buy
just,
this one.
Well, we're gonna need a bigger boat.
yeah. But, and I'm not saying that's the answer, I'm just saying this is just a spark that was in my head today. But I connected it to this experience I had at this conference, and what a difference being in a space that caters to the spirit of what needs to happen there. And our spaces now are beautiful in modern and I feel invigorated in a space like this. And you know, one of my pictures was a space where people are like, what is that place? It looks really cool. And there's people going in and out of there all the time. And I heard there's a coffee house there or something. And what do they do? People are meeting there and going out and doing things. And yes, and that goes for my Polaroids. And so I don't know, I just wanted to share that this space is speaking to me today. And you know, we've been concerned, we've had these conversations about our buildings, and yeah, it'd be totally different. But Alan, I think you were kind of on the same train of thought, that there, and as a couple of architects and space planners in the room, I think sometimes our spaces are limiting the way we think, even. So that's,
Well, space is always limited the way we think, but I think that we can also, there are both pluses and minuses about leaving for a completely new building, and the economy has to be considered. But don't forget that if we choose one church or the other, we don't have the cost of getting a third church. Plus, the churches can be redesigned.
right?
The churches can be redesigned. That will involve some expense, but I think if we, we can figure out ways to do that. And I'm certainly in favor of the redesign of one of our churches so that it's a more flexible space. But we're not necessarily stuck with the exact interiors of the churches we have. So I think we can be managed to a church as well.
Guys, can I suggest we not jump to
What I was gonna say, I think what Carolyn was talking about was the condition. And with all due respect, John, what you were talking about was a possible intervention. All right.
And Carolyn.
Respond.
One thing which has been very important, first to the visioning team and now to the coordinating team, is how we get the broader congregations to touch on and experience in some way the things that we have been going through. So we've done a lot of reading, and we've made some of those documents available to you and refer you to some quotes. How do we take this to the broader group to help them understand the kinds of things that I was very moved by this morning?
It's hard to do that because it's an experiential thing. I'm not sure that even us talking to our close friends or